Today's guest is John Michael Greer, and John is a widely read author and blogger whose work focuses on the overlaps between ecology, spirituality, and the future of industrial society. He served 12 years as the Grand Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America, and currently heads the Druidical Order of the Golden Dawn. For 10 years, John maintained the popular blog, the Archdruid Report, and recently started a new blog, Ecosophia, for the purposes of focusing more on the environment and man's place within it. He currently resides in East Providence, Rhode Island with his wife, Sara. And without any further ado, here's our interview with John Michael Greer. And welcome to another installment of the Progressives for Immigration Reform podcast series. I'm your host, Kevin Lynn. I'm the Executive Director of Progressives for Immigration Reform, and I have the great pleasure to be here once again with John Michael Greer. John, how you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on again.
And we are here in Providence, Rhode Island, your new home.
That's it. Well, so just across the Seekonk River from my new home. I actually live in East Providence.
East Providence. And we're going to talk about that.
We will talk about that.
And I'm really looking forward to it because we're going to kind of freeform it today, I think. I mean, because as I was trying to outline what we should talk about, there's just so much going on. I just have a feeling, we'll just have to start jumping down rabbit holes and see where it all leads us. But, when you look at what is going on, it is January the 9th. And today, it looks like, and I'm not sure because there was a press conference, and we might have a deal on immigration. Well, basically, Trump said, all right, within certain parameters, you guys figure it out, bring it to me, and I'll sign it. We'll sign a bill on immigration. So let's talk about that and where we're going there. It's 2018. Trump, one of his big campaign promises was that he was going to reform our immigration system.
Well, I think it was Mark Twain who said that no one's life, liberty, or property are safe when the legislature's in session. And so, Trump has figured out at this point, after a year, and that's about standard time for a brand new president, basically. Trump has figured out that he actually has to work with Congress. He can't simply do whatever he wants. And so we saw late last year the tax bill come through with all its complexities and perplexities. And we can expect to see more legislature coming through. Will there be some kind of immigration bill? No doubt. Will it give anybody what they want? Almost certainly not.
But do you think, looking back, that tax bill, let's talk about that for a moment before we talk about immigration.
The tax bill was a hoot. The tax bill was a classic middle finger directed at Donald Trump's enemies.
Which are the coastal dwellers.
Which are the coastal privileged classes primarily.
Interesting.
Well, the thing is, to understand American politics today, you have to use the word that nobody wants to use, neither on the right nor on the left, social class. You have to talk about class.
So when you say social class, are you referring to like an economic class, or is it really a social class?
It's as much social as economic. It is primarily economic. The division that I like to draw is between the salary class and the wage class. How do you get most of your income? Do you get a salary with benefits? Do you get a wage with none? That tells you a huge amount about the competing political interests in this country. Because by and large, the salary class supported Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely.
By and large, the wage class supported Donald Trump. And there are more wage earners than there are salary makers at this point.
And why, I'm curious, because there's 40 million of them, apparently, and why are they so angry?
Well, because they've been screwed systematically for the last 30 years by both parties. Basically, what happened in the wake of the 60s, counterculture, the powers that be bought off the protest movement by simply agreeing, okay, we're going to make things cushy for the middle class, for the middle and upper middle class. We're going to abolish the draft, which caused a lot of angst among middle-class families. The working class didn't greatly.
And that was the baby boomer demographic.
That was the baby boomer, yeah, exactly, baby boomer demographic. The working class didn't worry too much because the military for the working class has always been a step up.
True.
I
myself went in the military. I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, and it was the step up.
Exactly. In the working class, if you want to go someplace and do something, you want to get a college education via the GI Bill or what have you, you join the service. The middle class, it's a step down, and class issues matter in this society. Mm-hmm. When the Democrats want to evade talking about class, they talk about race. When the Republicans want to evade talking about class, they talk about morality. In either case, nobody wants to talk about the fact that the relatively privileged middle and upper middle classes have had a very comfortable time of it the last 30 years, and the working classes, the wage-earning classes, have been destroyed. When you were a child, when I was a child, a working class family with one income could afford a house to live in, they could afford a car to drive, 3 square meals a day, health care, all these other things. Nowadays, a working class family on one income is living on the street. Nobody is talking about that huge transformation.
I was in Los Angeles for 3 weeks in November,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to live in this one area, which was downtown
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles proper,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the streets would roll up after 5 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
and the denizens would come out from Skid Row and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's been an enormous amount of gentrification,
Uh-huh.
and I was blown away with the number of construction projects going on there. But interestingly enough, Skid Row hasn't gone anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And not only has it not gone anywhere, I bet it's twice as big. It's twice as big as when I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are way more homeless encampments.
Of course.
And I was speaking to an activist
Mm-hmm.
in the area, and he told me that for Black Americans in California,
Mm-hmm.
Skid Row is the fastest growing zip code.
Of course it is. The thing is, we have this, quote, real estate boom, meaning the real estate is becoming more and more expensive. That hugely benefits the middle and upper middle class who own real estate. It screws the wage-earning class because they have to rent.
Absolutely.
And that's one of many ways in which the entire structure of our society is slanted to benefit the salary class at the expense of the wage class.
I was just reading in the San Jose Mercury News this
Mm-hmm.
week that the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment
Mm-hmm.
is over $2,500.
That's insane. Let's be precise.
For a wage earner, that's impossible.
That's piracy. It's profiteering. It's the classic expression of the kleptocratic nature of today's American society, where those who have money think that God gave them the right to rip off everyone else to get more.
And when you think about it, you got to ask, where has the money gone? This
Mm-hmm.
latest tax bill,
Mm-hmm.
they're talking about $1.5 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
which makes my blood boil. But the fact is, trillions have been absconded with. You look at these unsuccessful foreign ventures.
The Pentagon is, for the first time in its history, getting an audit. That has been announced. That's because they were facing a hostile audit from Congress. And they've already admitted that some hundreds of trillions of dollars are completely unaccounted for. They have no idea. Over the last 40 years, they've thrown around these vast oceans of money. They can't account for them.
And
now, a vast amount of it has gone into people's pockets. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that.
Because it certainly hasn't gone into infrastructure.
It certainly hasn't gone into an effective military.
Absolutely.
I mean, right now, most of our naval fighter planes, the planes that are supposed to be taking off from aircraft carriers to defend American interests,
mm-hmm.
the FA-18.
F-18, right.
The FA-18, most of them are grounded due to lack of maintenance.
Wow.
They can't fly. Most of the Marine Corps' helicopters are grounded the same way. Our military is a basket case because it has been being used since the Second World War as a cash cow for the military-industrial complex, rather than a method for even pretending to defend American interests.
Because interesting enough, when I was as an econ student,
Mm-hmm.
we were always taught that defense security. These are all economic loss. You just, you want to limit those losses as much as possible. Here we seem to have been encouraging them.
Well,
Since
we've been encouraging the losses because every loss is somebody else's gain. Okay? And so if you have a kleptocratic society, if you have a society that is basically being run in order so that people with influence can rip off the system and pocket the proceeds.
And when you look at this last tax bill, there are definitely winners and losers
Absolutely.
to it. But why would the wage earning class, be happy with this latest?
The primary reason why the wage class is happy with it is the abolition of the Obamacare individual mandate. Okay, which was basically a device to force people who cannot afford health insurance to buy it anyway at whatever price the insurance company decides to charge. Now, keep in mind, everyone says, oh, medical insurance, yeah, sure, you put in your insurance and you get all your bills covered. Not a chance. The stuff that they were offering to the working class, stuff they could afford, bronze plans, which meant that you were paying for a family of 4 or 5 figures a year, more than your rent, okay, to get a policy with a $6,000 deductible per person and a 40% copay. This is what my wife and I were faced with. We've actually never had Obamacare.
You would be forced into bankruptcy at the first medical emergency.
So why are you throwing all this money down the throat of the corrupt insurance industry if it's not going to keep you from bankruptcy? But in fact, and this is the situation, of course, here again, if you're salary class, your medical care is covered. So of course you think warm, fuzzy things about Obamacare. You might
have to pay $80 a month. That gets taken out of your paycheck.
Exactly. Whereas if you're wage class, none of it's paid for, and you've got to pay up, $10,000, $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, depending on where you are and the size of your family, to get medical coverage that you can't use because you don't have the money to cover the deductible.
But it's
all there to pad the income of the insurance industry.
Is it the nature of a kleptocracy then that everything we need is expensive and everything we don't is cheap? Like, what's expensive? Housing, medical, education. We could probably spend an hour just talking about.
If you could get an education in this country, I'm far from sure that's possible.
What you mean, despite paying?
You could pay a lot of money, but are you going to get an actual education? From our public school industry these days, give me a break. For our universities, in most cases, equally, give me a break. But the things exactly, there's all kinds of cheap stuff.
It's almost like it's about getting the credential and not the education.
And since the universities have been very efficient at inserting themselves into every industry you think of to make their credentials required for hiring.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's just parasitic.
When I was, I do a lot of work as an advocate to limit the number of H-1B visa tech workers that are brought in. And she wouldn't allow me to interview her on the air, but she was someone who worked for a staffing firm that staffed a lot of tech projects for the government, the California state government. And she said they would draw up these projects requiring everyone to have certain certifications. Now, if you're in India, they hand these things out like chump change.
Exactly.
And and it wasn't uncommon that she would see the same resume for someone else again and again and again. So they would get their people in here. But the American programs, they might have 12 years experience, writing a certain type of code,
but they don't
have the certification, but they couldn't get hired on.
Of course not. Because the whole point was to drive down wages by hiring people from the third world who will work for chump change.
Right. And when you look at the cost of an education in India versus the United States, the cost differentials, it's very different.
The cost differential is huge. And also, by and large, based on what I've heard, the education you're going to get in India is considerably better. It does not consist of just going through the motions. These days, if you read the press releases from universities, you'll hear talk about how it's not so much about an education. What we're here to do is offer the university experience.
It's a pretty expensive cruise. You're
Signing up yes, for. Precisely. But the whole point is that it's become, I mean, it's a bubble. What it is, the education bubble. It's being born on the back of the student loan industry. And so what we have at this point, the higher education, I use that term very loosely. Mm-hmm. Higher education in America has devolved into a system of deceptive marketing for predatory loans being pushed on the desperate and the clueless. That's all it is. I'd like to see us get back to real higher education one of these days, but that's going to take some serious changes.
It will. And there are implications to that. I look at family members who mm-hmm. have recently graduated from college, mm-hmm. and they are forced to take jobs mm-hmm. so they can pay off their student loans, mm-hmm. as opposed to taking that path mm-hmm. to, let's say, do the Hewlett-Packard thing. Mm-hmm. Go out and work off in your garage and mm-hmm. build something. And
exactly. And this keeps them from doing that.
Absolutely. So that talent that they've uh-huh. invested 4 years of education exactly. is only doing something that appeases the market that allows them to pay back.
They're forced to, in effect, they're forced not to compete with the big existing companies. Very efficient.
I never thought of it that way.
No, there's a lot of ways in which you have to remember that the United States only pretends to be a first world nation. The United States is a third world kleptocracy with a really big military. That's basically the thing you have to keep in mind in dealing with the United States. If you treat it like a third world kleptocracy, if you make your assumption on that basis, it all makes sense. Donald Trump makes perfect sense. So does Hillary Clinton, admittedly.
Right.
That if you simply imagine this is some kind of corrupt, dysfunctional, failing third world state.
It's interesting you say that. Getting back to uh-huh. education, entrepreneurs, companies.
Go ahead.
When I lived in Korea, I mm-hmm. read a book by two fellows, Jones and Sakon, and they were doing a study on where entrepreneurial talent existed mm-hmm. in Korea. Mm-hmm. And they found that it didn't exist in startups. It existed within corporations mm-hmm. because startups were starved of venture capital. Mm-hmm. There were a number of things that prevented them from mm-hmm. happening. Mm-hmm. And just simple government red tape, mm-hmm. but then also the power of large corporations to mm-hmm. control markets and mm-hmm. market share.
Exactly.
So that's where it went. And that seems to be kind of where it's going.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, in the United States, you've got to realize that people like Bill Gates, looking at his own history, has got to be thinking, I can't let anyone else do that. Because they could do to me what I did to IBM.
I remember when I first went to Los Angeles a little over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. I was working for one of the large accounting firms, and uh-huh. I was kind of charged with finding these IPO-bound companies, these mm-hmm. companies that would be the next Microsoft mm-hmm. or whatever. And I was at Caltech, and they had just revamped their intellectual property program. uh-huh. Because what was going on was a company would come in and say, oh, hey, we'd like to either license or purchase that technology, and they'll let us license it for 50 years or 100 years. And they would simply take it and put it up on the shelf.
Of course, so they could keep competition at bay.
Right. And so what Caltech wisely did then was, we'll license you for so many years. And if you're not doing anything with it, we take it back. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly,
Exactly. Yeah.
We're preserving a monopoly.
Exactly. You have to remember that when we talk about capitalism, okay, and we talk about the free market, we're actually talking about opposites. Adam Smith, the guy who invented the theory of capitalism, he says in The Wealth of Nations that the first thing that a bunch of capitalists are going to do is make the free market as unfree as they possibly can. Okay, that's their job because it is to their advantage to minimize competition, to establish cartels, to squeeze out potential rivals so they can drive up the price as far as they possibly can and profiteer off everyone else. That's normal. Now, it is part of our American tradition that we regulate that.
Is that the role of government?
That's the role of government. Mm-hmm. Our American tradition here is to balance the power of the business sphere against the power of government. Now, it's a touchy balance because the business sphere can end up bribing government, as we have, in our current kleptocratic republic. But
it's called a campaign contribution.
It's called a campaign contribution, yeah. And then you can just ignore the fact that we have antitrust legislation, which had broken up firms like Microsoft and Amazon a very long time ago. Okay, but in fact, the basic idea, one of our core traditions here in America, is that we don't let that kind of stuff happen. Now, we're ignoring that tradition just now. I understand that. If we're going to get an economy that works again, we're going to have to get back to that. Mm-hmm. And remember that capitalism left to run rampant runs itself face first into the ground.
Do you see something happening in 2018 that might allow us to course correct?
Well, now people keep on putting their hope on some kind of big event.
Maybe I'm a doom. I guess in a way I'm a doomer.
Well, that's the thing. And it's understandable. People crave that, the idea of a sudden splat. It's dramatic. It's colorful. It fills all of those voids left for us by bad Hollywood movies. Okay, but in fact, the thing that's going to change is the thing that changed it the last time around. I mean, we were in the same situation in the late 19th century, where capitalism had run amok. We ended up with an incredibly stratified society with a small number of very rich people and a lot of people living dirt poor lives in some of the nastiest ghettos in the world. Okay, and there's people of all colors, by the way. We can get into that point later. But what happened was that people started organizing, and people start from the grassroots up, and people started throwing out the rascals and making life very, very difficult. It involved there were some ugly situations there. Bombs being thrown in through the carriage windows of the very rich became common enough that music hall songs were written about them. There's a lot of violence. People tend to forget about that when they talk about, the good old days of the late 1900s,
right,
late 19th century, and so on. But in fact, it was a very rough time. And what drove the progressive movement, what drove the coming of regulation, of sensible regulation, sensible trade regulation, all these sensible immigration regulation, was precisely the realization that government is the flywheel that keeps capitalism from running itself into the ground.
So there's an anecdote from the Roosevelt era where he said, his contribution was that he saved capitalism because he was able to get it to things to bend.
Exactly.
How does that be to bend?
Exactly. He had the huge advantage of the Great Depression and of what was happening elsewhere in the world at that time. People were looking nervously at Russia. People were looking nervously at Germany, where just a few months before FDR took power, was inaugurated, another guy got inaugurated as Chancellor of Germany. We've all heard about him and his little square mustache.
Right.
Okay, and this is the thing: people got scared, and they should have been. And the thing to keep in mind is that what happened as a result of the New Deal and all the problems that came out of it was the longest sustained period of prosperity in American history.
It was also one of the more democratic periods.
Exactly. Now, there is a very simple reason for that. Okay, an economy cannot survive if the workers who make products cannot afford to buy them. Henry Ford knew that. Okay, if your working class cannot afford to participate in the consumer economy, your economy is going to slam face first into one overproduction crisis after another, and eventually it's going to destroy itself, or you're going to get a charismatic demagogue taking power. And whether his name is Lenin or whether his name is Hitler or fill in the blank, you're in deep trouble. The alternative is that you do what Roosevelt did and what the rich did under Roosevelt, where they said, okay, we can't keep on doing what we've been doing. We're going to raise our wages. We're going to give the working class enough money. We're going to do what Henry Ford said. We're going to make sure that the guys who build the cars can afford to buy the cars. And that way, you have prosperity because you have a thriving consumer sector. You can't have a thriving consumer sector if the consumers don't have enough money to afford to consume. And no, you can't make up the difference with debt. We tried that. Yeah. It's been a disaster. So it's really simple. This is not rocket science. And yet, the drooling morons, if I may so express myself, who claim to be running America's economy these days, can't get that through the yard.
We just have to we keep relearning this.
We keep relearning it.
For me, I look at it certainly didn't start in 1992, but I saw it with the presidential election where a fellow like Ross Perot was trying to keep industry here. And the neoliberal view that, well, capital needs to be free to go wherever it wants to, and people need to be free to go where they want to. And then you add, so that was the offshoring. And then you add the, after 1965, we liberalized immigration, not with the intention of changing the numbers, but just the composition. But the unintended consequence was to increase the number. And then, of course, with Reagan, we knocked down the enforcement and everything. So we began to insource people.
Well, and the elimination of the enforcement is the crucial point, because the whole point of our current immigration policy is to make sure that the United States has within its borders a huge class of non-citizens who can be exploited with impunity. Okay?
And they really are.
And they are. And the thing is, we're going to get fairly deep into immigration here in a bit. But one of the points I want to make is that we should, if we're going to have an immigration policy in this country, we need to decide it openly as a democratic society and then stick with it, to make it a matter of law and to establish laws and then obey them and then enforce them. If, in fact, the people of this country want open borders and unrestricted immigration, let's have that and let's make it legal so the people who come across the border can have civil rights.
Good point.
But, and if we want less than that, if we want some more restricted, if we want to say, okay, how many new people per year can our economy actually can take in without crashing the standard of living for the working class? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's not have the current bogus system where we have these immigration limits which we ignore, so we have this huge exploited underclass that exists for the sole purpose of driving down wages and amping up profits for the very rich at the expense of working class Americans.
I was reading, it was several years ago, they were doing raids on meatpacking plants in the Midwest. And of course they didn't throw the owners in jail.
See, that's exactly the problem.
But one of the things the owners were complaining about to the writer of the article was that, in order to get a native-born workforce, they had to change work rules. They had to up wages. All these, they even sent a shuttle to the homeless shelter to get,
anything they could do, but actually support a working class who can play an active role in the American economy.
Right.
Exactly. And we can't have that.
And it's interesting because I look back again at 92 and I was very much engaged in the fight against NAFTA. I eventually worked for Ross Perot for a couple of years. And I recall just after the 92 election, we held a press conference in Phoenix, and a member of the Mexican Farm Workers Union came to speak. And he said, if this treaty goes through, you're going to throw 1 million Mexican farmers off of their fields. And essentially, that's what we did.
Of course. And that was the whole point.
And now they're all working in meatpacking plants.
Exactly. That was the whole point, to produce, again, that huge exploitable underclass. Now, when people talk about, we should have open borders, listen to how they avoid the economic dimension. No, it's all about morality.
True.
Okay.
And that's exactly...
It's all about morality.
They pull at the heartstrings.
Of course, because they don't want to talk about the fact that what it is a way of propping up the standard of living of the privileged middle and upper middle classes at the expense of everyone else. Again, you have to start with a class analysis. That does not mean, by the way, if we have any right-wingers listening, that does not mean I'm talking Marxism. Karl Marx did not invent the concept of social class. The ideas that he used on them were frankly full of... And we can leave it at that. Okay.
Shaving cream.
Yes, shaving cream. That will do. Shale. Oil shale. Lots of oil shale.
Lots of frack.
Lots of seriously fracking shale here. Yeah. And actually on my blog, we've made that the standard of
frack.
Frack, shale, and borehole are the standard obscenities there. I have a courtesy policy on my blog. We do not use profanity. We are polite to each other. And this is one of the reasons that I get anything up to 1/3 of a million readers a month.
Absolutely.
Because people are tired of the internet as the lowest common denominator of human grunting.
And you really can have good conversations if you allow yourself to.
All you have to do is throw people off if they act like jerks, and don't let them. It's really very simple. But yeah, seriously, there's some real fracking shale going on in this situation right now.
Absolutely. So when we look at class through the lens of immigration, and how it's used, there's an economic dynamic to that. Is there a social dynamic to that?
Yeah. Watch when the Democratic Party talks about the poor. Okay. They don't mean the working poor.
Right.
No. They don't mean the people that wait on them at restaurants.
That they don't tip all that well
at all. If you've worked in retail, you know that the Democratic core, upper level demographic, they treat people like crap. I mean, you have not been abused as a retail worker until you've had a couple of wealthy yuppies tear your head off because the salad leaf wasn't absolutely perfect or something like that. And these are people, and in fact, if you listen to them, you'll find out, yes, these are people who voted for Hillary Clinton. Okay. Do they feel marvelously sorry for the poor, but it's not the poor that they have to deal with. Okay.
Right.
Exactly. We really do need to revive the use of a certain word that is dropped out of common use in modern English.
What's that word?
That word is snob.
Snob.
There are a lot of liberal snobs out there. People who claim to feel profoundly for the sufferings of the poor, but when they actually have to deal with them, treat them like crap.
So it's easy to emote.
It's easy to emote. Let's see them actually ride the bus. This is a thing that I deal with this all the time in my blogging, because I talk about how if we're going to have a saner energy policy, if we're going to
absolutely,
that needs to be something that those of us who are concerned with it need to lead by changing our own lives. And that means get rid of the car. Okay? Take public transit. Yes, I know. I've already heard the screams of our audience, people clutching their pearls or their Gucci neckties. I can't possibly live without a car. Yes, you can. I've lived without a car my entire adult life. I've never owned one. I've never driven one. That doesn't mean I'm a saint. It means that I'm willing to
make a sacrifice. Would you consider that a sacrifice?
No, I'd say it's a matter of accepting a little bit of inconvenience.
Okay.
For the sake of the planet. Okay, the planet that, again, everyone loves to emote about, right?
Right.
Exactly. It's not that difficult. It's not that challenging. What it does require you to do is sit on a bus alongside a bunch of poor people. And that is something that your average upper middle class liberal would rather fry their own fingers in fat than do.
But I had a fair trade latte today.
I'm sure you did. Yeah, and you didn't. And I bet you didn't tip the poor person who served it for you either.
Not especially well.
No, there we go. Yeah, that's the thing. It's really easy to emote. It's really, and it's especially. I'm trying to remember the name. It was one of Charles Dickens's stories. There was a character who was deeply upset about the condition of the natives of Buribuliga. Okay. Oh, she was bent out of shape about these poor natives over there. She treated everyone around her horribly badly.
Right.
Her household was a disaster. Her life was a mess, and she was making everyone else's life a mess. But the poor natives of Buribuliga. Okay. Buribuliga gets a lot of sympathy in today's America. And maybe we need to get out of the bubble and go see what all of these glorious policies that we're all busy prating about actually do to people's lives. I had the experience up until quite recently. I spent 8 years, my wife and I, living in a small town in the north central Appalachians. Okay. In western Maryland, to be precise, 5 miles south of the Mason-Dixon line. Not south enough to be really south, not north enough to be really north. a town that used to be a thriving industrial center before we shipped all of our industry away to China.
Right.
Okay. And I got to meet a lot of the people who have been getting a lot of hate speech from liberal snobs.
I mean, and it really is hate-filled and bigoted.
Oh yeah,
in many respects.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh no, if you want to hear real first-rate, top-of-the-line, foam-flecked hate speech, do not go to a Klan rally. Get a bunch of upper-middle-class liberals talking about white male working-class guys, especially if they're from the South. You will hear vicious, prejudiced, bigoted, stereotyped. Oh, it's great. And if you point out that to any of them, oh my, the fur will fly.
I'm sure it will. And yet at the same time, they'll flick on a light switch and the electricity will come on. But there's some working class person out there who's climbing a pole to make sure that it does.
Some guy in West Virginia dug the coal that made that light switch go on. Or, some working class guy, more often than not, ran a drill in a natural gas field to make that light go on. Somebody in a hard hat, could be either gender in this case, is running the power plant to make that light go on. Do they think of that? I don't know. I certainly don't see any sign of it.
And it's when you look at, again, through class, everything starts to make sense.
That's the thing. And that's the problem. Because nobody wants it to make sense.
Because this way they allow us to fight amongst each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's an identity politics. No, you could never feel come to my understanding of the world because you're not my skin color, you're not my gender, you're not my sexual preference.
Yeah, well, there was a Roman guy named Terentius a very long time ago. And he was brown-skinned, by the way. The Romans were not white, as we would define that. Okay? And he said, I am human, and I hold that nothing human is alien to me. I'm sure that would probably be denounced as a horribly bigoted utterance, but, that strikes me as one of those basic things that all of us could aspire to.
I've seen a bit of that in action lately. I've been involved in Lancaster. They're running a natural gas pipeline through the county.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is they want to frack it up in the shale fields and then run it to an LNG terminal in Philadelphia and then ship it overseas to sell it at a profit.
Of course, yeah.
The wonderful thing about these activists that have been at it for over 3.5 years, and once they started to actually put the pipe in the ground, everyone thought that would be it, but it wasn't. They began to engage in civil disobedience. But in the most polite, enlightened way you would imagine. Everyone, initially people had to be restrained from saying nasty things about the workers. They weren't allowed. And in fact, because the people organizing and really everyone involved now realizes that these guys are just like, we're all in this together. We're all trying to put food on our friends. We all want to protect our homes. That's what we're doing here. That's what you're doing there.
Exactly.
We hate the company, but we understand this. So,
well, guess what? Many of the workers probably hate the company too. It's just, that's where they can get a job.
Well, interestingly enough, an anecdote that came out of that, and to show you, because, a number of activists have been arrested. I know it's well north of 30 have been arrested, conducting civil disobedience. But a healthcare worker reported that one of the men, because a lot of the workers come in from other states, because they have that experience coming from Texas and other places. And he was suffering from hypertension. And he had told the healthcare worker that, for the first time, he doesn't feel good about what he's doing. These people that, he doesn't hate the protesters. He understands where they're coming. They made that connection.
If you treat people like human beings, they will sometimes treat you like human beings. Funny how that works. And the fact that activists are starting to get that, rather than pursuing the totally self-defeating politics of hating the other guy.
Yeah, and it's probably no fluke that it came from an Anabaptist strain of folks, and who really have peace is important and the golden rule.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, we could get fairly deep into why it's been so verboten to do things that way. in especially politics on the left recently, why the Democratic Party in particular is fixated on a politics of hostility and opposition.
And you really saw that right after Trump won the election.
Well, there was, besides the collective nervous breakdown, because, oh my God, the candidate of those people. I'm old enough to remember when the phrase those people meant people of color. Now, those people means the working poor.
Absolutely.
The despised poor, the people we don't want in our neighborhoods.
Question. I'm just curious. We'll get off the reservation roll.
Sure.
Do you think Trump was the accidental candidate?
In a certain sense, I don't think he had any expectation of winning when he started.
Now you speak with some authority here, because the reason I like having these conversations with John is you're right most of the time. And you were in January 2016. You said Trump will win because he's speaking to what you were just class warfare.
Exactly, because he's actually giving a large enough sector of Americans for the first time in generations, frank talk about the realities of their situation. And so, I predicted that he was going to win, and he won. Now, it did not hurt that Hillary Clinton ran probably the least competent presidential candidate I've seen in my lifetime, and I've been watching presidential elections since Hubert Humphrey's day. Okay? She did an abysmally bad job.
I believe to this day that primary was stolen from
Of course
Bernie
it was.
Sanders.
No, and if Bernie Sanders had won the primary, as he should have, if the people's wishes had been followed through, Bernie Sanders would be president today. There's no question, but he would have won. Hillary was an incredibly weak candidate, and she ran a very bad campaign, and she got slaughtered as a result of it. Okay, and that actually was something that I predicted, I believe, in June of 2015, looking at Hillary going through the motions and basically doing everything but presenting the American people with any reason to vote for her.
Yeah, she was always saying, "I'm anointed."
I'm anointed. I'm so ready to lead. Okay, and why should we want you? But the thing is, I don't think Trump thought he was going to win at first. I remember some of the things he said early on in the campaign where he's going, whoa, as people are just turning out in mobs.
Absolutely.
To even his opening rallies. And he realized, okay. And I think, I really don't think that he thought until election day, until we all saw the election returns come in, he was probably as shocked as anybody.
Because I remember distinctly, I forget it was 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, the look on their faces was like, there wasn't jubilation. There was like, oh my God. This is real.
Now We've won. Yeah. Now what? Yeah. And the thing is, this kind of thing happens in American politics. There's nothing new. There's nothing new in it. You could really offend almost everybody in America by pointing out that one of the last really major examples of this was the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, True. Which nobody thought he was going to win either. He was a fringe candidate of a brand new third party.
And that led to the dissolution of the Union.
Exactly. It was sufficiently much of a shock to everyone. Yeah, the country fell apart, and we had a little thing called the Civil War to put it back together again. But yeah.
And now he's the president.
Now he's the president. He's had, it's usual for a first-time president with inadequate experience take about a year to get his feet under him. And so again, the passing of the tax reform bill shows that he's figured out more or less how to work with Congress. And now there's an immigration deal in the way, and there's going to be a whole series of other legislative things. Mm-hmm. He's also following a range of other promises he made on regulatory reform and so on. And of course, he did get rid of the Obamacare mandate, which is red meat to his working class supporters. So I'm going to make another prediction about 2018, which is that at this point, my guess is that the Democratic dream of a 2018 landslide that will give them Congress and repudiate the Trump is a pipe dream.
Yeah, I don't see it either. And the reason I don't is when I look at where the victories have been, they've been against candidates that were so poor, so on the Republican side, so poor. And I've seen no introspection on the part of the Democratic Party. I have no true reform. It's still, it's almost like let's continue to wipe off that 92 manual and go at it again. There's been no serious restructuring.
No, there's still, and that's why you watch that when they're busy coming up with the whole Russiagate business and so on. They have to find some reason why they lost, other than the fact that they lost, other than the fact that Hillary Clinton ran a really bad campaign and never got around to promising actual change at a time when the status quo had become completely insupportable for a very large number of
Absolutely. Americans. I mean, the whole the policy of neoliberalism.
It's a total disaster for everyone but the very rich. And unfortunately, it's been long enough since the Great Depression that the very rich have forgotten that they could end up dangling from lampposts if they're stupid enough. It has happened. Okay? And so just they learned that in the Great Depression. And that's what gave America the New Deal. But crucially, it's what gave America again, its period of greatest prosperity in its history. So it'd be nice if they got a clue again.
Yeah, and then I go back to, again, I'll be back in Los Angeles later this month, and I'll be back in Skid Row.
Yeah, exactly. You have my sympathy. See, I have a sneaking fondness for Los Angeles.
But you grew up on the coast.
Well, I grew up in Seattle, which is a very different world. But I have a sneaking fondness for Los Angeles. There's a certain basic honesty. Everyone there is there to get rich, get laid, get stoned, or what have you.
Yeah, and they do work. I mean, it's if you walk onto a set at 6 a.m., people are hitting it. They're knocking themselves out.
Exactly. I've been down there just a couple of times in my adult life. Most recently, some years ago, I ended up being brought down there as a peak oil expert to record a segment for a umpteenth anniversary release of Mad Max. I don't know if I ever appeared on it, but I filmed a section. That was fun. But no, I mean, Los Angeles is in its own way a fun place, but I can't imagine living there. It would be just exhausting.
Yeah, for me, I'd been there 20 years. And
wow.
I think I'd been drinking too much one night and accepted an offer to go with the firm that I was in to go to the Los Angeles office. That's pretty much how it happened. And
that seems somehow very apropos.
And then 20 years later, I wake up and I'm there. And what had happened to me, because I don't think I ever really liked Los Angeles, but it is like the song, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. There's things like the weather, but for me, the externalities just got to be too great. The traffic. Just so many things that just made, the quality of life difficult.
That was my experience with Seattle also. It had enormously good quality of life when I was growing up there. And well into my through my 20s and 30s. But by the beginning of the new millennium, my wife and I were looking around as the city frantically sold its soul to developers, and the bluest. Some of us remember the song "The Bluest Skies You Ever Seen Are in Seattle."
That was the Here Come the Bride show.
Exactly. Well, that hasn't been true for 30 years now. It's for the chemical smog.
I'm 55, so that was right. Yeah, So for those who are a bit younger than us, that might have went right over your heads.
Yeah, exactly. but in fact, Seattle used to be a really pleasant, modest, comfortable, green town, and now it's Los Angeles North. And so we fled. But
now, how do you like East Providence?
East Providence we are having a great time. East Providence is a working class town. It's got a large Portuguese American community. It has various other ethnic communities. It is, as so many of the East Coast urban areas are, it's very much a town of neighborhoods. But it's the kind of place where there's a farmer's market there every summer, and the farmer's market is crowded with people. The shoppers and the vendors are every color you can imagine.
But were there two professors at, was it San Diego State?
San Diego State, who are insisting that farmers markets are racist. Now, remember we were talking about class.
Right.
Okay. When a liberal wants to avoid talking about class, they talk about race. Okay. Now, Every farmer's market I have ever been to, maybe some of our listeners will have different experiences, but everyone I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of them, they accepted SNAP and WIC benefits. Okay.
And when I was in downtown Los Angeles, they did as well.
Exactly. They certainly do at East Providence. They did at every other place I've been to. Now, here's the thing. It's one of the few places that poor people of every color, every skin color, every ethnicity, in an urban area can get fresh fruits and vegetables and other fresh products. You typically, we've all heard about food deserts.
And you're right. Newark, New Jersey is a great example.
Yeah. Well, here's East Providence isn't quite a food desert. It's close. Where in the area where we live, the nearest approach to a grocery is the Dollar General.
Oh.
Okay. Now, which is actually not bad. They've expanded their food line, which is.
I know there's a frozen food section.
Yeah, there's a frozen food section. There's packaged food section. You can actually get enough to get by there, which is something. And it's very much. It's very much aimed
for about a year and a half. Things were going bad financially. I was couch surfing and all that, but and going 99-cent store and going and loading up frozen food. There were actually some fruits, bananas, and apples.
But 3 blocks from the Dollar General is the farmers market, where you can go and get fresh fruits and vegetables and other kinds of produce and seafood and many other things produced by a multi-ethnic crew of vendors. You have everyone from the aging hippies from the rural areas out past Seekonk, to swamp Yankees from downstate, to African-American inner city garden crews who grow excellent vegetables, and people of every ethnicity, okay? And people of every ethnicity are there shopping. So small farmers and gardeners are making money. People are getting good produce. What's racist about this? Nothing. What is the problem here is that these guys have to deal with poor people showing up in their neighborhoods to shop. Oh, the horror.
Not liking that.
No. We can't.
Only if you're there to trim the hedge.
Exactly. Not to buy collard greens. You can get collard greens at our local farmers market. I know. I've got them. I like collard greens.
So there are real costs when you look at. And then when you get beyond how class warfare is implemented, identity politics. Yeah. There are huge costs to this.
Of course,
one, we can't get come to terms on an immigration policy that works for everyone.
And of course, that's the whole point, so that we can have this the worst of all possible worlds, where we have this huge exploited underclass.
Yeah.
And who does that benefit? The very rich.
The very rich.
Nobody. Actually, stockholders. Stockholders. Anybody in the stock owning class, which is not your working class folks, ladies and gentlemen. They don't have pensions.
Right. There are some litmus tests here.
There are some litmus tests.
Do you have health care?
Yes. Is your health care paid for by your employer? Okay.
Because you can get healthcare at Starbucks, but it's going to cost you. You're a barista.
Exactly. And of course, one of the other things that's going on there with regard to healthcare, and one of the core things that nobody was talking about with the whole Obamacare business, was the extent to which so many Americans, especially but not only in the wage class, are abandoning mainstream healthcare for alternative healthcare because it's cheaper. Because you can actually get 55 minutes of undivided attention from a provider. And because it doesn't have the hideous side effects that so many pharmaceuticals have these days and so many medical procedures have. So it was some years ago, there was a study indicating that more office visits, there had been more office visits to alternative healthcare providers that year than to mainstream healthcare providers. That was most of a decade ago, I think, and it was not long after that the whole thing for Obamacare started. Basically, an attempt to force people who didn't want healthcare to pay mainstream healthcare to pay for it anyway. And now that that's falling apart, we'll see what the medical industrial complex tries next to try to keep maintaining a situation where they can increase...
Keep herding us into their offices.
Basically, coming up with a way where they can increase their share of the national income by % per year at the expense of everything else. Now, evil phrase here,
Mm.
People are going to shriek again. clutching of pearls, clutching of Gucci ties, zero-sum game. Okay? When you have an expanding economy, you can expand your the amount of money that's going to healthcare without anyone else suffering the consequence. But we no longer have such an economy. The only section of our economy that's expanding is the speculative economy, and that's for the rich.
And is that indicative where you have companies like McDonald's, whose revenues haven't changed since 2008,
exactly,
but their stock is up 150%?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's purely speculative economy. They're playing games with the stock. Who benefits from that?
They do their stock buyback.
Exactly. Who benefits from the games with the stock? Not the person who's flipping the burgers.
No.
Not the person who's buying the burgers. Okay. So yeah, in today's American economy, we have to deal with the fact that if anybody increases their share, somebody else loses. Okay. And so that's one of the reasons you were mentioning infrastructure a little while ago. Okay. Why is our infrastructure falling to bits? Well, because we're spending billions of dollars on Bitcoin. Because we're spending billions of dollars on stock buybacks. Because we're spending trillions of dollars on, hey, let's have another foreign adventure. The last 3 invasions of foreign countries worked so well.
And isn't that indicative? I mean, I think we've both come to the conclusion we're not a republic or an empire.
Well, the thing is, you can have both. The Roman Republic in its last 2 centuries had a major league empire. No, the thing is, we are a republic. We're a profoundly corrupt republic. A republic that where clearly votes still matter to some extent. I mean, Donald Trump didn't get elected, despite everybody in the political class having a world-class temper tantrum about it.
But even the Bushes were voting for Hillary.
It was yeah, exactly. No, the entire political class basically lost it. That was, I think, one of the great. It
really was fun to watch.
It was entertaining. It was just watching the meltdowns, watching the screaming tantrums, the 5-year-old fleeing on the floor, pounding with the fist, drumming the heels. Wah! Okay. But, come on, folks, get up off the floor. You've had your tantrum. Maybe you need to deal with the things that put Trump in the White House, which are not that everybody who voted for him is a racist, sexist, fascist, blah, 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 blah. Every other bit of hate speech I can think of. It's because the existing policies being pushed by neoliberal economics and neoconservative politics were a total disaster for 80% of Americans. And somebody finally offered them a choice, and they took it. If the Democratic Party wants to rescue itself from ultimately collapse, these political parties in this country go out of existence. When's the last time you voted for a Whig?
Exactly.
Okay.
It does happen.
It does happen.
Go the way of the dodo.
They do go the way of the dodo. The Democratic Party is a couple of failed elections away from, if they're lucky, being taken over by a bunch of young Turks who will throw the existing policies and the existing policymakers out on their ears and actually do something that makes some kind of sense.
Because it still is
being replaced.
It still is resilient. In 2004. It was funny, by 2006, we were referring to the progressives of 2004 as the Big P progressives, because at that time it was easy, in 2004 it was easy to spot a progressive in the Democratic Party. You were either wearing Howard Dean or Dennis Kucinich swag. Now,
oh yes, of course.
Now in 2006, we retook the House. And then 2008, President Obama was elected. And
gave us 8 more years of George W. Bush.
But what happened was the progressives were forced out.
Of course.
I still say to this day, the wisest thing for us to do would have been to walk away. Let it collapse on itself. What we did was we reinvigorate. And this is what I saw with the one thing I didn't like about the Bernie campaign, and I'll say this, and I've said it before, is I saw it reinvigorating this monster. Once again, all of a sudden people are signing to be Democrats. They're paying dues. They're, they're giving life to this beast.
Well, Now, and that could end up turning into a good thing, because I hear from a lot of people by way of my blog and other venues who are very interested in politics. They want to get involved. They feel closer to the Democrats than the Republicans, but they are totally sick of the Democratic Party leadership and the Democratic Party policies that it's had for the last 30 years. And those of them who are paying attention are going to work at the grassroots. And this is the crucial thing. You're not going to kill the beast at the top.
No.
You're going to change. You start from the grassroots. Start taking over county and state organizations. Start pushing through policy changes at the local and state levels to begin with.
And you can do that with shoe leather.
You can do exactly. You can do that. And so it's as that begins to really bite that you're going to start seeing the beginning of the change, the possibility the Democratic Party will reinvent itself or have itself reinvented against the desperate screams of the Obama and Clinton crowd. Yeah, it's one of those things. But what I expect to happen, actually, I'll make another prediction. I've already talked about the 2018 election. 2020, okay? If this follows the usual pattern for a disruptive election of the sort that Trump's was, the Democrats are going to go into 2020 convinced that nobody could possibly vote to put Trump back in. Oh my God, nobody. They're going to win. They're going to run some absolutely bland hack who has no original ideas, and they're going to run exactly the same kind of failed campaign that consists of nothing but sound bites, the kind of utterly cynical, empty campaign that Barack Obama ran in 2008. Hope, change, yes, we can. What do those mean?
They're not supposed to mean anything.
No, exactly. No,
yeah,
but what they meant was that he was going to give us 8 more years, as it turned out, of George W. Bush's policies while pretending to do something different. I think of Barack Obama as one of these, as kind of a mime. You know, the way that a mime will do this thing about pretending to be so Barack Obama pretended to be a progressive.
Oh, okay? Absolutely.
He pretended to be a liberal, and the same way that a mime pretends to be in a telephone booth. And he went through all the motions and pursued all of the worst policies of George W. Bush, and the left ate it up.
Loved it.
They adored it.
And I always said one of the problems after 2008, you couldn't get anyone into the streets anymore to... the only people out there were the wonderful folks at Code Pink who were still protesting the war. Everyone else,
well, it's our war now. It's a good war because we're fighting it. Yeah, exactly. And so he was able to increase the amount of drone strikes, to just keep on doing all of George W. Bush's policies, all the things that the Democrats have been denouncing in lurid terms for 8 years, and all of a sudden they loved it, which proved what hypocrites they were. Okay? And I think a lot of people, that really, really did sink in. And it played a large role in keeping a lot of people home on Election Day in 2016.
More, I believe that.
Yeah. But my working guess is that the Democrats are going to go into 2020. They're going to run a bland candidate and a bland campaign. And it's all going to be about overthrowing the legacy of Trump. And they're going to suffer a humiliating defeat. And it's after that real change will happen.
Because they may have no choice. They're imploding. So
yeah, exactly.
At that point, they'll listen. Even in 2004, they were listening for the first time. The Progressive Caucus grew, but eventually it became co-opted.
But then that's because it didn't focus on building an independent grassroots presence that could take the party away from the circles of the privilege, and because so many people were simply too comfortable with the status quo. I mean, we were talking about emoting. It's great to emote about the horrible things that George W. Bush is doing, but when it's actually it's filling your pension, and you're comfortable, your salary's fine, all these policies, you love to hate them, but you want them to continue. How do you justify that? Why, you engage in the kind of protest that won't change anything. And that's what we've seen continually since the days of Ronald Reagan. Okay? We're gonna march down the street and wave signs. Great. Protest marches mean something only when they're backed up with grassroots organizing, political and actually mean something come election time. Okay?
Can you get people to the ballot?
Can you get people to the ballot? Can you organize something? Can you put pressure on politicians? Everyone knows that. If all you do is march, nobody has to pay attention to you. It's just aerobic exercise. But it feels good because then you can tell yourself, no. I'm fighting for the earth. I'm fighting for the children. Lovely abstractions, okay? But you don't actually have to make any changes happen.
Mm-hmm.
And since you don't want changes to happen because that might imperil your pension, or what have you, that might, that might upset the apple cart on which you are riding high. Marching, showing up to the march or doing all this stuff. It's all very comforting.
And it's ego. It helps boost the ego, and you feel you're contributing.
It makes you feel good, which is fine. I have nothing against feeling good, but if that's as far as your politics go, are you missing something here?
I look back. A while back, I drove past the town of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which was the scene of the Hazleton massacre. It was the first time there were protests at the mines, and it was the first time the Slavic workers had come down to join the Irish, German, ethnic workers, and I believe it was six workers were killed in that. But that's when that's where things were really beginning to turn and change. I mean, people weren't making, trying to get change to feel better ideologically. No, this is to put food on the table.
Exactly.
So eat.
And that's where that was what made the progressive movement of the late 19th and early 20th century inevitable, because people were starting to realize it's that a revolution. And
like you said, I don't think Americans today, they underestimate what desperate people do. And
exactly.
Gerald Celente likes to say, when people have nothing left to lose, they lose it.
Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching mentioned, people who have nothing to live for are not going to be afraid of death.
Something to consider.
Exactly. And as our privileged classes support policies that run the majority of Americans face first into the gravel, that's already put Donald Trump into the White House. It could get much, much worse. And so maybe our privileged listeners, maybe those who are sitting pretty with their employer-paid medical benefits and their pensions and their annual vacations in Mazatlan and all the other perks of privilege, need to stop and think, these policies that I'm supporting, what are they actually doing to the people who are supplying me with this comfortable lifestyle?
These lower classes.
The despised poor. The people...
The soiled masses.
Those people. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we need to take them into account. Maybe our Democratic listeners need to remember the Democratic Party once supported those people, listened to them, took their needs into account, and it was during those years the Democratic Party dominated this nation's political structure. And it was when the Democratic Party threw the working classes under the bus that the Democrats became a party of also-rans.
Yes, and that's really what we see today.
That's what we see today. Ever since Ronald Reagan basically brokered a whole series of catastrophic changes, the Democratic Party's basic strategy is promise the world to everyone, and then when you get into office, look at the last successful Republican administration and copy it. And copy it. Well, saying, but we'll do it with a smile.
You'll like us more.
You'll like us more. We'll say pretty things. Well, never mind. Yeah. We can leave the rest of that to the imagination of the listeners.
We are running out of time.
Okay.
I was curious. We've talked about the coming 2018. You talked a little about 2020. When you look, what do you see as what would be the three big issues that Americans will be contending with between now and 2020?
The first issue that we're going to be contending with in a very big way, although everyone's going to be trying to avoid it, is the twilight of American global hegemony. That's happening right now. That's having huge effects at home as well as more generally. The fact that
it sounds like it almost looks like it couldn't happen, because A couple years ago, China tried to divest itself of U.S. treasuries, only to find themselves awash again in dollars. And it just seems that we're, America hegemony, that whether it's the dollar or it's the aircraft carrier is out there.
The dollar is the crucial thing. It's been estimated that basically the fact the dollar is the world's reserve currency right now adds about $6 trillion a year to the American economy. Okay? Just we get that kind of benefit.
Okay.
Now, as we speak, Russia and China have basically stopped using dollars in their trade between them. And they have a huge amount of trade between them. Iran is doing the same thing with Russia and China and a great many other countries. There's all of these bilateral currency agreements that sidestep the dollar. The days of the dollar as the global reserve currency are fading. What happened was the Chinese tried to do it the easy way. Okay, and they discovered that it didn't work. And so they said, okay, you have certain advantages if you belong to a civilization that has 5,000 years of history. Patience is one of them. And you can always go, okay, that didn't work. Let's do this one instead. Okay, so we're watching right now a series of next stages. And the thing is, at this point, given all the other stuff the Chinese treasury has stuffed into it right now, they don't really have to worry if their dollars suddenly stop meaning much of anything.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's a much easier approach. But generally speaking, since the extremely successful Russian intervention in Syria, and the cascading consequences of which have not even begun to register, hardly, that's immense. It has declared basically Russia's back as a major world power, and the fact that it carried on an operation with an operational tempo that the United States Air Force could not have matched, and basically went into a situation where the U.S. had been fighting Daesh, not winning, of course, just randomly dropping bombs in the desert and this kind of stuff, and proceeded to
safeguarding them.
Yeah, of course. Well, we don't have to get into that. We don't have time. But but basically cleaned their clocks in a matter of a couple of years. There are major shifts underway. So we're going to have to deal with the decline of our
American hegemony.
American hegemony and its economic impact as the dollar starts seriously losing value. Okay. So we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the accelerating collapse of our national infrastructure. That's reaching a point where it's becoming a major issue. Okay.
And I see it. I use public transportation almost, most of the time I'm not on a bike.
Yeah.
And I see it everywhere. Yeah. Deferred maintenance. Elevators not working.
Yeah. The country's falling apart. We've thrown so much money into the speculative economy, the kleptocratic speculative economy on the one hand, and foreign military adventures on the other. Our country is literally falling to pieces. And the third thing that I think we're going to be dealing with is the collapse of the cultural political correctness on the left. Because that has pushed itself to the point of absurdity. We were talking about the San Diego State professors who insisted farmers markets are racist. You can take something like that only so far before a growing number of people start going, give me a break. And I really think the cultural political correctness on the left has gotten to that point. I hear more and more people who are of progressive views, people who are genuinely concerned about the same issues as progressives, who hear the latest diatribe from some privileged academic about how X is race, whatever X that threatens their privilege is racist, is what it usually amounts to. And at this point, it's just, give me a break. As that whole thing begins to collapse, it's likely to have some very powerful impacts on the likely popping of the academic bubble, which is a huge issue.
Absolutely. When you look at what students are having to pay for tuition and what little, as you mentioned before, they're getting back.
Oh yeah, and huge numbers of young people these days are just saying, "I'm not going to college."
And why? I was talking to a banker a few months ago, and they just were opining that once students get wise to what their college education won't buy them in terms of salary, he can see a bunch of liberal arts colleges closing their doors straight away.
I have heard, I have friends in the academic industry, and I think we need to call it an industry at this point. I have friends in the academic industry, and they are saying that word that's kind of whispering through the crawl spaces is that when the crunch hits, probably half the universities in America are going to go out of existence. That includes some very big names, ones that everyone has heard of. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, crunch time is approaching. But the collapse of political correctness is part of that. There's also likely to be some backlash, some of it very unproductive. Whatever you think, I mean, however absurd the political correctness movement has been, it has actually accomplished some good things. It has helped feed such things as the extension of marriage rights to same-sex couples, which I think is an entirely good thing. And generally, there are some very good things that have come out of it. And it's going to take some work to hold on to those as the backlash hits.
Right.
And the backlash is hitting. So those are the three things that I expect to really fill the important parts of the news, as opposed to the noise and the tantrums and the, oh my God, Trump took a breath today, or what have you, that fills so, and the entertainment that passes for so much of news today. I think those are going to be major issues. And then, of course, we'll hit the election, the run-up to the 2020 election, and that's just going to be a three-ring circus with dancing bears and more clowns than, well,
and collusion. I'm sure we gotta have collusion.
Oh yeah. Boris Badenov is going to be working overtime.
Squirrel.
Squirrel. You take most of the squirrel. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a total fruit basket upset. Okay, and I have to say, probably the toughest job in the world is the job faced by comedians and satirists who have to write about this stuff. And when we get to 2020, I would not be surprised if The Onion simply closes its doors and says, we can't compete.
We've been overtaken by
reality. There's nothing we can say that's more absurd than what's coming out of the mouths of both sides of the political spectrum.
Well, John, this has been great.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we had time to spend together. Mm-hmm. I got to visit Providence, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. This is really a neat, even in winter, even under a blanket of snow, this is a really great-looking town.
It's a very pleasant place.
And, glad things are working well for you and Sara here. Mm-hmm. And looking forward to having you guys come back down and visit in Lancaster.
That would be very welcome at some point.
And I'm looking forward to coming up here when there's no snow and checking it out.
It's worth your while. This is a very beautiful part of the country, and when you grow up in the West, there's this sort of bizarre notion that everything east of the Mississippi is one great urban blob. Okay, all pavement. Mm-hmm. This is a very green state.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we have a falcon nesting near our house.
In a city.
Oh yeah, and it keeps itself well fed on the local pigeons. So yeah, it's a very pleasant place, and we're very glad to move here.
Wonderful. Again, John, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me on.